When I surprised my wife with divorce papers, she attempted to murder me. I secured her a lengthy prison sentence. My wife is a cheating hoe. Based on the fact that I'm sitting here writing this. Though depressing, it's the reality. Even if I detest that reality so much, I believe that having solid knowledge of it is preferable to live in constant doubt and fear. All I need to know now that I know for sure is what I should do as my next course of action. Right now, that's the most crucial thing. This may or may not be essential, but let me give you some history. I, a 28-year-old man, am married to my 26-year-old wife. For 2 years prior to our current 4-year relationship. At least by today's and my friends' standards, we were married very young. But that didn't really concern us. You should be aware of one thing about my wife. I recognized her weakness. For lack of a better term, very early on. She has always been the type of lady who finds it intolerable to see blood, violence, or anything of that nature. When she is under a lot of emotional strain, she practically collapses. Although I never really thought that would be a deal breaker. She is a softie. Frequently it has been really inconvenient because she is the kind who sobs after a difficult day at work, or when one of her coworkers treats her badly. It can irritate me when she gets upset about things that I wouldn't even blink an eye at because I have thick skin. All individuals are unique, and I recognize that right away. In all honesty, I believe that after a while I began to become accustomed to it, or perhaps she became less of a snowflake and more resilient with time. That is how they use the phrase, isn't it? We relocated to a different location after we were married since I was able to secure a decent job there, and she didn't mind moving as she worked in retail. She did raise a fuss when she moved away from her mom's place since it would take her an hour and a half, rather than only 20 minutes, but when her mother spoke to her, she finally got over it. We moved swiftly to a reasonably decent apartment in the new town, and I had saved up enough money that we could equip the place without too much trouble. To be honest, I was doing my hardest to make sure she was comfortable because I knew how much she didn't want to move. Recognized that I didn't push her to relocate. She didn't want to, but she did since it would have been foolish to turn down the almost twice as much money as my new job offered. She knew that her family wasn't on a different continent, after all. It was a victory in and of itself when she ultimately secured a job in retail and didn't appear to detest it. Prior to the new job, I worked remotely, but I had to come in 3 days a week, and I would get home rather late on those days. Nevertheless, I always made an effort to make sure she felt at ease and that it wasn't too difficult for me. There wasn't much I wouldn't have done for this girl back then since I loved her so much. When I returned home one day, I saw a small piece of plastic on the floor close to my bedside table, which was the beginning of the trouble. It appeared as though a corner had been ripped off one of the flavor packets that come with instant ramen. In general, I was unable to identify the marking on it because it was taken off. Immediately, the first foolish thought that entered my mind was ramen, but shortly after, condoms entered my consciousness. That didn't make sense to me, but it may be from one of those, and we didn't wear condoms. To be honest, I had a really difficult time persuading myself that there was cheating. She didn't seem to be mentally inclined to be unfaithful. That may sound harsh, but that's just the way I view things. To successfully cheat, I believe you have to be highly astute and rather unremorseful. But I might be totally mistaken. The problem is that I don't want to stress myself out over something that. I questioned her straight away what I was holding since I thought it might not be true, but she appeared to be just as ignorant as I was. I genuinely believe that she was as blind to the truth as I was, but it didn't ease my feelings because it didn't prove that she wasn't being unfaithful. However, I didn't worry too much at the same time. However, I did mentally note that when the chance presented itself, I would probe about. Winks, I believe, passed after that, and for some reason I forgot everything about my vague concerns. That's what I suppose occurs when they're sufficiently gentle. It's simple to brush them off. Regretfully, the true issue arose when I discovered an empty condom wrapper beneath the bed. It would be impossible to convince me that this one was there before we moved in, because it had the entire edge ripped off and wasn't dirty in any way. The flat was supplied by us, and I'm sure I would have seen a used condom wrapper on the bedroom floor. To be honest, I had to give it a lot of thought as to whether or not we had ever worn a condom, but I was positive that we had never done so. That was a really bad moment for me, because even though I had what could be considered concrete evidence of my wife cheating, I wasn't comfortable enough with my situation. That was all the evidence I really needed, so you may call me foolish. But perhaps you don't realize how powerful denial can be. More than I had ever desired in my life, all I wanted at that moment was to be proven incorrect. At the time, and to this day, I haven't told her what I discovered. I've kept it confidential. Since Twitter was her most used social media platform, I won't name it X, but checking her account there gave me the validation I was seeking for nevertheless. But why don't I utilize it? It must have thus always seemed like a secure place to her. It clarifies why she was preoccupied with making out with a certain person who kept popping up in all of her remarks. That's what made me reach for her phone and message the same person on Twitter when I had the chance. The exchange was really pornographic. It was honestly more graphic than I had ever seen her in the past, and it was obvious that she was hiding several quirks from me because she was too timid. I've always been honest in the bedroom, so that aspect really annoyed me. Apparently, certain parts of her may have been seen by someone who wasn't her spouse. Numerous notes were found there that amply demonstrated that the two of them had shared a bed. She was having an affair with this guy. Or rather, it seems that she still is, as their relationship was obviously not a one-time occurrence. If not him, how can I find out the number of remaining? During my stay here, I acquired the skill of recording the proof. I thus tried to take as many photos as I could. I'll need it when I see a divorce attorney. That's pretty much all then. It truly hurts my heart to know that my wife is having an extramarital affair. I guess you never really know people, but I'm also a little confused by the entire affair since I never really thought she had the mental toughness for something as sleazy as this. I don't need you all telling me that since I was foolish to assume it in the first place. I refuse to confront her. All I have to do is get an attorney and have the documents sent to her. Sincerely, I can't stand living in the same house as her any longer, so I won't waste time finishing anything. Correct. I found an excellent attorney. He is definitely expensive. More than I'd want to pay anyone, but I just want the work done as soon as possible, efficiently, and to my greatest advantage. Documenting what you've learned is a smart idea since it will come in handy when navigating the divorce process. You should be clear about the last point, particularly with regard to alimony, and it's excellent that you're taking the initiative on it. Revision. To start, let me apologize for the lack of updates on the tale I posted here a long time ago about my soft-spoken wife cheating on me with a guy on Twitter. Yes, that's really relevant that I was in the hospital, but I shouldn't be apologizing for that. I think you're all going to find the reason I was in the hospital to be the most intriguing aspect of this whole ordeal. I'm trying to find some comedy in the way that everything has turned out, at least. So, as I said months ago at the conclusion of my last article, I was able to find a lawyer. We spoke, I gave him the retainer, and very soon after he prepared my divorce documents. I'm glad he was efficient since thinking about that retainer still hurts. The day I made the decision to serve this woman with the divorce papers was the day my life truly altered. I approached her when she was watching a TV on the couch and gave her the envelope without confronting her about the infidelity. She stared at it, her expression utterly bewildered, and then she opened it and removed the papers. When she did that, I noticed the color go from her face. Her hands began to shake as well, and her breathing became labored. I thought she was going to suffer a heart attack or something, but before that could happen, she asked me why. At that point, I finally told her all I knew, including the condom wrapper I had discovered, her flirting with the guy on Twitter, and the private messages I had secretly been reading. She broke down in tears and repeated herself. Please, at that time, it seemed like the only word she knew. I knew that I would not bow to her entreaties. Sincerely, even though I loved her before anything, it seemed like I was accomplishing two goals at once. She would stop being such a wimp, and that would be my problem. All I could do was shake my head. That was the only thing I could think of to express how I felt without swearing and calling her names. She eventually appeared to become weary of sobbing and simply collapsed on the ground. After a while, I gave her the order to go to the room, gather her belongings, and go out. I let her do that for 15 minutes. I was seated on the couch with my back to the TV while she was working on it. I was there alone with my thoughts, berating myself for every choice I had made leading up to this moment, even if it wasn't on. I was lost in thought for a while. My attention was drawn back when I noticed something moving in the TV's reflection. When I turned to check what was behind me, I just had time to see her briefly holding a knife before she stabbed me in the shoulder. At this point, everything is rather hazy in my memory, and I'm having trouble recalling the specifics of how it happened. Perhaps the adrenaline at the time was to blame. However, I do recall that she took the knife out and stabbed me once more, this time in a smaller area. After that, I was able to rise to my feet, and I believe I attempted to go to her by climbing over the back of the sofa. And that's when I believe she hit me in the stomach. I recall dragging myself to the phone to dial 911, when I struck the ground at that moment. I'm not sure when she left the house after I collapsed. I just seem to recall calling 911. I don't even know if I was able to say anything throughout the chat before I passed asleep. I was stabbed 3 times by her, in the upper back twice. Then once in my belly, then around my shoulder. It may seem like a scene from a movie, but yes, I woke up in the hospital, and it took me over 10 minutes to figure out how I might have ended up there. One thing I took away from my time in the hospital is to never, ever trust anyone again. Furthermore, never judge a book by its cover. Because I've saw this same woman throw up from blood after being stabbed 3 times and losing over 2 liters of blood. I gave it a lot of thought though, and to be honest, I believe that her personality had a role in what transpired. She seemed to have snapped at me when I surprised her with a piece of paper. and she thought that murdering me would protect her from the repercussions after all. She was undoubtedly attempting to kill me. I threw her off when I glanced back after she had stabbed me farther in the back of my neck. That practically saved my life, because if she had succeeded in her goal, I would not have been able to contact 911 since I would have been so damaged, since it was an attempt on my life. I have realized how lucky I am to still be alive. It was interesting how fast my worries shifted from securing a divorce from an unfaithful wife to ensuring my survival and, luckily, that she was locked away. Eventually, I managed to accomplish the final goal. Because she was a simpleton, she chose to hide out with her mother at home rather than going elsewhere. Of course, the cops had no trouble finding her, and her mother had made no attempt to conceal her. The attempted murder charge is by far the most compelling of all of her accusations in my opinion. At that time, I wasn't particularly concerned about the divorce, but I was still determined to see it through. We concluded things there while she was awaiting trial. The terms of the divorce have to be entirely changed by my attorney. He thought our best chance could have been to purchase alimony and take everything else, but now he wanted everything. At that point, she hadn't been proven guilty or anything, but the new development was clearly going to go my way. Not surprisingly, it did. When things were officially ended, I sobbed. An unfaithful and murdering ex-wife doesn't deserve to be rewarded in any manner, shape, or form. I haven't sobbed in a very long time. It all came. He indicated that proving to a jury that the stabs were meant to kill me would be the hardest thing to do. We ultimately ended it all in one day, but not before I had to testify in court and endure one of too many really dull days. She was convicted guilty of assault with a dangerous weapon, aggravated assault, and second-degree attempted murder. Yes, on all 3 counts. It's funny how my initial instinct was to get into bed and snooze, but I felt such a sense of relief at that time. She was sentenced to 10 years. That disappointed my attorney, but it appeared the court was unwilling to turn over the key to her. Try not to be